The Nike Zoom Fly 5. Is this fast or is it a flop? Let's get into it. But before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're subscribed watching this content. Thanks so much, love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Strava, all sorts of other social medias, just to follow along what's going on with marathon training and all sorts of other fun activities. So before we, officially discuss the shoe, I'll leave the specs for it right here. And because this is a first impressions of the shoe, we're just gonna go over the specs for, my size and just kind of how it relates to the course of all sorts of other shoes. So the shoe itself weighs about 10 to 10.1 ounces in my size, which is about 8.5, which is, I guess, more of a average everyday trainer weight for a shoe, kind of like the Infinity React 3 and like the 2, in addition to some of the other more easy run and this size shoes. I think the Zoom X Invincible was even close to that weight as well, which is funny because from, an outward glance, the shoe does resemble some combination of the Zoom Fly 4 and the Zoom X Invincible, and it looks like this is just their kid, basically. And I think I made that inference in a QA stream I had maybe a couple of months back, actually, where someone asked me to review the Zoom Fly 5, and yeah, that's basically what I kind of just concluded from the looks of it. What else? We got a heel stack of about 41 millimeters, and then we have a forefoot of about 33 millimeters, which gives it an overall stack height of about 8 millimeters, so more of an emphasis on the forefoot. Toe box kind of striking area, which personally I enjoy a lot in a daily trainer and a race shoe. Some other stuff, of course, the upper doesn't have a whole lot of material going on. There is like an inner sock that's basically got this kind of hole pattern on the sides, both from, the archway and the outside of the shoe, or on the, what's the word I'm looking for? And I'm blanking on this right now. The supinated side of the foot, I suppose. The exterior, posterior, that's what I'm looking for. And there's just a bit of material here in the forefoot area to just kind of block it out. But if you were to take this on a cold run, I'll tell you from personal experience, still kind of cold. It's not going to be your warm day, or it's not going to be your cold day kind of shoe because it's not that warm in the toe box. But moving on, it's pretty basic, I would say, with the tongue of the shoe. It's not really gusseted. It's just a straightforward tongue. It is malleable. You can adjust it however you need to do so, but it's not going to be fit form to the front of your foot like, some other shoes like the Zoom X, Vaporfly, and the Alpha Fly's tongues, respectively. And moving on, of course, we do have just a standard heel collar. There isn't a lot of material, but it's, I'd say, an average amount of material here in, like, the lip of the shoe. That's just going to give you a little bit of cushioning as we go along, but it's pretty standard as far as I'm concerned. So let's move on to the, the exteriors of the shoe, the outsoles, just to give you their first impression looks and just some of the stuff we've got going on. So I've got some dirt here on the left side of the shoe there in the toe box area, but this is what the shoe looks like sort of at the beginning of its life, in addition to 2 treadmill runs and 1 outdoor run, putting me at about 10 to 15 miles already in my first impressions of this shoe. So, some other things worth noting, I would say, as we go to the midsole and the bottoms of the shoe, is that it is using Zoom X all the way across, just one huge stack of Zoom X, in addition to a carbon plate that I believe is running the entire duration of the shoe. But there's an interesting phenomenon that happens here that we'll get to as I kind of break it down more. The outsole of the shoe resembles more of, I would say, the Zoom X Invincible. I don't think it's the exact same exterior as the shoe. There are some features that look similar, in addition to like the shaping of the rubber on both ends, but I think the pattern is different both ways, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to correct myself on that if it's not the case. Another thing worth noting with this particular shoe is that Nike labeled it as using recycled materials to build the shoe, which I guess is like an interesting cost efficiency, less spending of materials kind of phenomenon that happens when it comes to these shoes. And I don't know, it's whatever. As long as you can make a product that works, I think it's okay. But yeah, basically you can see from this opening right there, there is like a legitimate piece of styrofoam that's just kind of sitting in there. I don't know if it's being used as the piece that's in between the carbon plate and the Zoom X foam, or it's just a feature they have in this particular midfoot area designed for running in this kind of case. But yeah, it's quite interesting to look at from that perspective. So those are the general specs in addition to the visual appearances. Let's talk about what's great and what's interesting and what may be ugly about this shoe from, again, a first impression standpoint. So what I noticed immediately with this shoe is that, sure, it feels a little bit heavy, but not in the way that you would think. It actually feels toe box heavy. And this was the interesting piece when I took it for my first run, was that it seemed like there was a major emphasis, and it feels like the weight of the shoe is really in the front of the shoe, which almost forces you to engage in this midfoot to forefoot to toe box kind of striking pattern. Which, I guess if you look at the shoe from a symmetry kind of balance, yeah, there's a lot of material in the heel here, but the carbon plate isn't really stacked in this heel, I don't think. But there would be definitely a lot more carbon plate in this forefoot area, a much wider piece of it, of course. There's a lot more busy material on the upper on this side of the shoe, and there's a lot more of a, bigger piece of rubber on this side as well, which could counterbalance the weight of the shoe from going heel strike to forefoot. That was something I enjoyed overall. And now, in terms of some of the other things I saw in this shoe in terms of reviews, I did kind of take a sneak peek at other things. A lot of people were not inspired by this shoe necessarily. I guess we'll get to that a little bit later. They said that the shoe was running stiff. Now, on the treadmill, it felt a bit stiff, but now in terms of running outside, I don't have much of a valid perspective to give you, only because I was running when it was about 5 degrees outside Fahrenheit, which is like almost definitely below freezing and almost 0 degrees Fahrenheit, etc. So the point there is that if there is a carbon plate in the shoe, it's going to be a lot stiffer than normal temperatures for operation of the shoe. So if I am experiencing some kind of stiffness, it'll be more emphasized. But the other thing to note is when you're running on snow, you get a bit of a softer landing, so you kind of get away with it in that sense. So you got to get away with it in terms of the impact being a little bit lighter. And now from that perspective too, the grip wasn't so bad on ice and snow as well. I guess this pattern it's not bad, but it's not great for running. It doesn't have like a whole lot of traction, but it's like moderately decent, and I wasn't complaining about it when running on ice. I was thinking, and I was like more conscious about running a little bit slower on ice, but I wasn't experiencing a slip like I would have on like the Mach 5 or the Pegasus Turbo 2 when I was still using it in my daily lineup. What else is good? What else is bad? I guess something to note was that right now, for some reason, I guess what I'm experiencing are symptoms of like plantar fasciitis, but not in the heel, right? Or not at the bottom of my foot. I'm experiencing it more on the arches of my shoes. And it's more profound in like the Mach 5, and it's less profound in carbon plate shoes. And the reason I say this is because when I was riding the Vaporfly and the Zoomfly 5, assuming both of them, their commonality is the stack height and the carbon plate and the ZoomX foam, this combination of materials may be helping reduce the load and the soreness in the arches of my feet, and could be providing enough support for that kind of pronation that may be occurring. And as a result, the shoe is kind of helpful with plantar fasciitis if you're experiencing those particular symptoms. If you got like the heel symptoms, can't really help you. Never really experienced that for myself. The last thing I think I'd like to talk about is probably the utility of the shoe. So if it's got a carbon plate and it's not being labeled as a racing shoe, I assume it's an everyday speed shoe. So used more for your tempo and threshold workouts, and possibly for everyday workouts if you have that niche desire for a carbon plate shoe. So the question there is this shoe performing its job? Now, I would say personally at this point, yes. I was testing it on some treadmill intervals where I would push it past a 5-minute mile almost into like a 450 kind of range, and the shoe will hold up with you very well, and it's quite controlled actually on the treadmill in particular. And with this front weight being, counterbalanced to having you have a more emphasis towards like the forefoot area, and the shoe not really turning sideways while you're running, but keeping this kind of straight line because of the weight and I would say the aerodynamics of the shoe while you're running, it was very comfortable at fast speeds, and I would definitely try to push it into like a 5-minute mile range just for the heck of it, just to see if it's possible. And just for myself, I know like in this shoe you can really just run a sub 4 in almost anything that's kind of reasonable, but in this particular shoe, sub 5 would be kind of nice. The idea is that I think right now the shoe is performing the job I want it to, and it can do a little bit more other than be a shoe that I can use as a race day shoe because I have race day options. But if I needed just an everyday shoe that I can just kind of chill with, this shoe would be okay. It'd be a little bit front end heavy, but maybe I'm fine with that. It could, of course, be the everyday racing shoe that I'm looking for, the everyday speed trainer, whatever you want to label it. Good shoe for like my tempo workouts, for threshold. And as of right now, I would say the only shoe it's not going to be good for is like recovery runs, because of course with a carbon plate, it is a bit more stiff and has a little bit more, I would say it has less recovery functionality than something like a Mach 5 or an Infinity React Run Flyknit. Something with a bit of a more controlled foam and more, I would say, soft areas on the foot that would kind of give you more of, or I would say less resistance than something like this carbon plate, which would emphasize the idea of utilizing more calf muscle to push off the ground to get you more speed. So in this case, yeah, this shoe would probably emphasize more of those muscle groups and kind of encourage you to run faster if you push just a little bit more. It's, you know how it is with carbon plate shoes. You can put like a little bit into it and the shoe will kind of return a lot more. And that's kind of always been the controversy with this kind of shoe in this case. Or in the Vaporfly case, it would be a 4% increase or whatever it was. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Zoom Fly 5 right now. And again, I understand that the shoe gets a lot of negative flack from other runners and other reviews and articles that I've read on the shoe, and that's okay. I think it's just fine from at least this perspective of my first impressions, how I'm experiencing the shoe. And now it's very possible that maybe down the line when like the weather gets better, if I run somewhere where it's warmer, I'll start understanding some of the cons that other people were experiencing with this shoe. So yeah, overall, right now it's pretty okay for what it needs to do, which is to be an everyday racing shoe, your tempo type of rider, your threshold riding shoe. And from that perspective, I can't really complain. I kind of bought what I'm looking for, and honestly, at a price tag of about 120 bucks US dollars at the time of this video, it's not a bad buy. And like, you can get this shoe in a different colorway for I think like $90. So you could really snag a good deal on this if you're interested. But yeah, that's kind of my overall impressions of the shoe right now. Again, we'll see what happens at about 50 to 100 miles, depending on what kind of terrain I'm running on. Hopefully I can get outside once the snow starts kind of melting away and it kind of warms up, which I think it's supposed to at the time of this video filming. So again, I will leave it right here with the Zoom Fly 5. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.